The old man stumbled onto the dusty pavement, his weathered hands clutching at the air to break his fall. The bikers roared with laughter, treating his pain like a cheap sideshow. No one nearby stepped in. Only cold indifference surrounded him, but they had no idea. Just 45 minutes later, the growl of military vehicles would pierce that silence. Type respect if you believe those who sacrificed deserve to be honored. Tom Bradley adjusted his faded veteran's cap as he pulled his 1968 Chevy C10 pickup into the lone gas station in Cedar Hollow, a forgotten town in rural Nebraska, on October 3, 2025. The October chill bit at his knuckles, the sky heavy with gray clouds threatening rain. At 82, Tom moved with a careful slowness, not from fear, but from wounds earned in the rice paddies of Vietnam, where he'd served as a combat engineer. His thinning white hair peeked from beneath the cap, and his face, etched with lines, held the quiet resolve of a man who'd once built bridges under enemy fire. The truck, much like Tom, bore the scars of time. Its once silver body was now a patchwork of rust and faded paint, the tailgate creaking with every bump, but it ran with a stubborn determination, just like its owner of 45 years. Tom eased out of the driver's seat, his left shoulder, dislocated in a '69 ambush, stiff with every movement. He reached for his wallet, pulling out a crumpled $10 bill, and shuffled toward the pump. Near the station's faded sign, four bikers lounged against their motorcycles, their leather vests patched with flames and their arms inked with tattoos that spoke of rebellion, not sacrifice. They eyed Tom with predatory amusement. "Look at this relic," one scoffed, a wiry biker with a shaved head. "Bet that truck's older than dirt." Tom kept his gaze forward, ignoring the taunt, as he'd done in far more perilous situations. He'd learned decades ago that some fights weren't worth the cost. Inside the station, he paid for his gas and a pack of gum, the bored clerk not sparing him a glance. Tom didn't care. Invisibility was a shield when your memories echoed louder than the present. At the pump, Tom unscrewed the gas cap with trembling hands that had once diffused minds under gunfire, now struggling with simple tasks. He didn't notice the biker approaching until the man loomed beside him, smelling of leather and stale beer. "That thing even roadworthy," the biker sneered, kicking the truck's rusted fender. "Looks like it belongs in a junkyard." Tom met the younger man's gaze with pale green eyes that had once scanned jungles for threats, eyes that had seen freedoms this man took for granted. "Gets me around," Tom said simply, focusing on the pump. Something about his quiet defiance sparked fury in the biker. "I'm talking to you, old man," he barked. "This ain't a museum parking lot." The others sauntered over, forming a loose semicircle around Tom. The clerk glanced out the window, then turned back to his phone. "Just getting gas," Tom said calmly. "No trouble." "No trouble," another biker mocked, snatching the nozzle from Tom's hand. Fuel splashed onto the pavement. "Trouble's here, Pops." Tom bent to retrieve the nozzle, his shoulder screaming in protest. As he reached down, the first biker shoved him hard, a cruel, careless push that sent the old man sprawling onto the pavement. His hands scraped raw against the asphalt, his hip striking with a jolt that sent pain radiating up his spine. The bikers laughed, a cruel, hollow sound from the young and untested. "Look at him," one jeered. "Can't even take a shove." Around them, the world moved on. A delivery driver looked away. A woman hurried past, head down. A teenager filmed, but made no move to help. Tom lay there a moment, not from weakness, but from the crushing realization. This was what he'd fought for, the freedom for people to ignore the vulnerable. Slowly, he pushed himself up, a trickle of blood running from his scraped palm. He didn't wipe it away. Instead, he straightened as best he could, climbed into his truck, and started the engine. The bikers stepped aside, disappointed by his silence. As Tom drove off, their laughter trailed him like a fading echo. What they couldn't see was the steel in his eyes, the same unyielding resolve that had carried him through ambushes long before they were born. What they couldn't know was that Thomas Bradley had never been a man to seek vengeance. But he knew when a line had been crossed. Tom drove through Cedar Hollow, one hand pressing his bleeding palm, the sting sharp but familiar. More concerning was the ache in his hip, a dull throb that hadn't been there before. He pulled into Ed's auto shop, hoping to check the truck's rattling engine. Ed's son, Kyle, looked up from his workbench, frowning at the blood on Tom's hand. "You okay, sir?" he asked, not moving to help. "Fine," Tom replied. "Just wondered if you could look at my truck. It's been rattling." Kyle gave the Chevy a cursory glance and shook his head. "Too old. Parts are hard to come by, and it's not worth the fix." Tom nodded, hearing the unspoken truth. He was too old, his truck too old, neither worth the effort. Without a word, he drove away. Memories washed over him as he navigated the empty streets, nights in Vietnam, the stench of mud and gunpowder, the weight of a wounded comrade he'd carried to safety. Both had lived, but the scars lingered. The irony burned. He'd fought for a country where he now felt like a stranger. Bled for freedoms enjoyed by those who mocked him. Sacrificed for a society that saw through him as if he were a ghost. At 82, he murmured, "The worst hurt isn't the bodies. It's being forgotten." He parked at the town's small Veterans Memorial, a weathered stone etched with names, shaded by a lone maple tree. From his wallet, he pulled a faded photo, 10 engineers in jungle fatigues, standing before a makeshift bridge, their faces tired but proud. Tom was on the right, younger and stronger, his eyes sharp. On the back, faded ink read, "Bridge Builders 69, the ones who held." Behind it, a card he hadn't touched in 40 years, "Emergency contact only, Engineer Corps 69. Through decades of hardship, the loss of his wife, his daughter's estrangement, the nightmares, Tom had never used that number. Pride, perhaps, or the belief that a man handles his own burdens. But today, something broke, not his body, which had endured worse, but his faith in those he'd served. From his pocket, he pulled his old flip phone, fingers trembling as he dialed. He expected nothing. 40 years was a lifetime. The number would be dead, the people gone. Yet something drove him, the instinct that had kept him alive in war. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then a voice answered, crisp and alert. "Verification code." Tom froze, then recalled the protocol. "Bridge Builder 69 Charlie," he said, his voice steady. A pause, then recognition. "Stand by for confirmation, Sergeant Bradley." Tom sat still, the phone to his ear, as another voice joined, older, commanding. "Tom Bradley. It's been a long time." "Too long, Colonel," Tom replied, memories flooding back. "What's your situation, Sergeant?" Tom exhaled. "I need the unit, sir." No questions followed. Only 3 words that stirred something long dormant in his chest. "Help is coming." 200 meters away, at the Veterans Engineer Corps Association office, Colonel Robert Klein, 77 and retired for 22 years, activated a protocol unused in decades. "Bridge Builder Emergency Assembly," he announced over a secure line. "Thomas Bradley has called." Within minutes, phones rang across 5 states. Men and women in their 60s and 70s answered, no questions, no hesitation. In a Kansas farmstead, retired Staff Sergeant Henry Mills opened a locked chest, pulling out a tactical vest. In an Iowa library, former Captain Susan Carter left her shift without explanation. In a Missouri garage, mechanic Joe Tanner dropped his tools, driven by a bond forged in battle. Meanwhile, at the memorial, Tom sat on a bench. The bleeding had slowed, but exhaustion weighed heavy. His eyes drifted shut, a half-alert state he'd never unlearned. The bikers, by chance, rolled into the memorial park, their engines disrupting the quiet, performing stunts that scattered walkers. They hadn't noticed Tom. He waited, a skill honed in war. The first black SUV arrived 45 minutes after Tom's call, its government plates and Engineer Corps emblem visible. 2 minutes later, a second arrived, then a third, forming a perimeter around the park. It was a containment pattern Tom had helped devise in Vietnam. The bikers' amusement turned to unease as doors opened with precision. Out stepped veterans, gray-haired but moving with purpose, wearing black shirts with the Engineer Corps insignia. Without a word, they converged on Tom. The park fell silent. Conversations halted. The bikers straightened, sensing a shift. Colonel Klein reached Tom first, kneeling before his old friend, a gesture of respect. "Sergeant Bradley," he said, his voice carrying. "Bridge builders reporting as requested." Tom's stoic mask cracked, emotion shimmering in his eyes. "You didn't all have to come," he whispered. "All of us or none of us," Susan Carter replied. That was the rule. Joe Tanner examined Tom's injuries, his engineer's hands gentle. "Who did this?" he asked, his tone calm but sharp. Tom gestured toward the bikers, now frozen. Colonel Klein stood, facing them. "These men laid hands on Army Sergeant Thomas Bradley," he declared. "A hero who built bridges under fire, saving hundreds of troops." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Phones rose to record. "He's lying," a biker stammered, his voice weak. Henry Mills stepped forward, holding up a citation. In '69, Sergeant Bradley constructed a bridge under enemy attack, ensuring an evacuation route for 150 soldiers. He was wounded twice and held the line alone. The bikers' defiance crumbled. One stepped back. Another looked away. Joe helped Tom stand, his military bearing returning despite the pain. "We don't want trouble," the lead biker muttered, aware of the witnesses. "But you were eager to cause it," Klein replied, his voice steady. Local news arrived, cameras rolling, as police pulled up. A young biker broke rank, approaching Tom. "Sir," he said, voice trembling. "My dad served in Vietnam." If he saw this, he trailed off. Tom studied him. "Honor him by being better," he said quietly. From the last SUV, an officer emerged with a polished case, revealing a new Bronze Star, Tom's original, lost in a fire 30 years ago. "The Army located you, Sergeant," he said. "This is yours." Tom stared, memory pressing his chest. "I never wore it for praise," he murmured. "We know," Klein replied. "That's why you earned it." That evening, Cedar Hollow's town hall overflowed, the story of a forgotten hero spreading fast. Tom sat in front, uneasy with the attention, his bridge builders around him, gray-haired warriors forming an honor guard. The mayor spoke, voice thick. "For 40 years, Sergeant Bradley lived among us, unseen. Today, we honor him." When Tom rose to speak, his voice steadied. "I didn't call my unit for recognition. I called to remember a time when we stood together, when no one was left behind. I don't blame you for not knowing me, it was my choice to stay quiet. But look at the elderly man at the diner, the veteran on the corner. Their stories matter." A boy, no more than 10, approached with a small flag. "My uncle was a soldier," he said. "He'd salute you." Tom accepted it, nodding. The bravest carry courage inside. A town committee formed, planning a monument. Courage endures. Honor our veterans. The bikers approached, their leader subdued. "We'll escort veteran events, sir. Free of charge." Tom nodded, redemption was a lesson he understood. As he drove home in his truck, now promised a free restoration, he affixed a "Proud Veteran" sticker. Colonel Klein rested a hand on his shoulder. "Will you be okay, Tom?" He looked at the town that finally saw him. "I think so. Sometimes you fall to be noticed." "You never fell," Klein corrected. "You stood tall." We just forgot to look. As the bridge builders parted, they gathered around Tom, brothers and sisters in spirit. Some bonds never break. Tom drove home, no longer invisible, his valor now seen. Heroes bear medals or scars, both deserve respect. Have you ever seen a good person treated unfairly? Share your story, voices like these deserve to be heard. Type respect if you believe those who sacrificed deserve honor. Subscribe to Echoes of Valor to remind us daily, respect never fades. Thomas Bradley's tale teaches that heroes live quietly among us, enduring silently, never seeking praise. In a world that rushes past the elderly or frail, we must pause to see the warrior beneath. The bent figure at the pump might have once built a lifeline under fire. The quiet man at the store might have saved lives in chaos. Their wars didn't end with their uniforms. Many returned to fight memory's battles, to heal wounds that linger, to face a society that forgets too soon. Today, let's promise to notice the heroes in our midst, to offer respect not for their past, but for the dignity every soul deserves, especially those who gave all for others. Type honor if you believe in treating everyone with dignity, regardless of age or appearance. True respect sees the hero within, medals or not.